Adidas have just launched the third iteration of their Copa Pure series. And right here, we've got the second tier takedown model with the Copa Pure 3 Pro. And these boots are going to retail for $140, and they definitely have a lot of differences compared to last year's model. But are they actually worth it compared to all of the other models that you can get around this price point? Well, we're going to be covering that as well as all of the other features of these boots in this video. And as usual, if you're interested in these or any of the other boots that we discuss in this video, you can find links to them on sale with discount codes in the description below. So without further ado, let's get things started by talking about the design. Now, while Adidas does make many leather football boots in today's market, the Copa Pure is probably going to be their flagship leather football boot. And leather is going to be the first thing that you notice when you get these out of the box. And I gotta say, when I reviewed the premium version of the Copa Pures last year, those were the Copa Pure 2 Elites, I got them for around $250, and I honestly wasn't that impressed with the quality of leather. But I think Adidas have actually done a lot of work in this area, because with the Pro models that I have here, especially with the leather that's used in the forefoot here, this is some of the smoothest leather that I've felt from Adidas models, especially from anything in their Copa Pure line. Now, Adidas does specify on their website, when I went to do a little bit more digging on these boots, that the Fusion Skin upper is actually going to be a hybrid of both leather and synthetic materials. And the way this upper is constructed, it's kind of hard to tell where the synthetic material starts and the leather material begins, but ultimately, I think the only thing that you really need to know as a player or someone who's going to be potentially buying the boots is that the upper feels really good. It's definitely extremely soft to the touch and also fairly thin. Now, another new feature in these boots that I thought was pretty eye-catching is the addition of this new sock liner that's running through the center of the boots. To me, the way this liner is both constructed and the way it feels on feet, it feels like Adidas is taking a lot of notes from the Tiempo Legend 10 Pro, which executed a very similar sock liner in their previous model. And overall, the liner feels really nice. It's made from a relatively thick material and has a nice stretch to it, and it runs all the way from the top of the ankle here down to the base of the toe box. But unlike what you would see on the Tiempo series, the liner here doesn't actually run around the ankle. It's just going to stop at the tongue here, and then you have a more traditional heel area. And the lacing system that Adidas uses here is going to give you a lot of adjustability, even though you have that addition of the elasticated sock liner, and you're also going to have an added lace hole at the top of the ankle here. And we'll talk later about why that additional lace hole is going to be really important for getting a decent fit out of these boots. Moving to the back of these boots, you are going to have what I found to be a relatively shallow heel area, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then towards the back of the heel, you're going to have a decent amount of padding towards both the left and the right side of the heel. The overall design and the padding in the heel area isn't quite as premium as what you would find on some of the more expensive Adidas models like the Copa Icon 2, which retails for around $180, or the F50 Elite, which is closer to $250. But nevertheless, at the $140 price point, I think I've seen some better heels than this. Now, moving on to the underside of these boots, Adidas have finally ditched the torsion frame outsole that we saw on previous versions like the Copa Pure 2, and I'm pretty happy about that because that previous outsole I wasn't a huge fan of. I found it to be just a little bit too rigid and also pretty narrow towards the toe box. Now, the shape of this new sole plate here is actually going to be very similar to what you're going to find on most other Adidas models right now, like the Predator as well as the F50. The shape is very similar, and then the stud pattern I would say is pretty reserved and pretty simplistic. You're going to get a total of 9 conical studs in both the heel and the forefoot that are kind of around the perimeter of the boots, and then you're just going to have these 3 half moon shaped studs, kind of 1 in the middle and then 2 just on the outside of the midfoot here. And I think the purpose of those slightly more angular studs is just to give you a little bit more rotational traction compared to if the boots were just made of conical studs. These boots are advertised for use on firm ground natural grass, but in my opinion, and having used these on artificial grass, I think that they're safe for AG, at least in my opinion. Honestly, if I were designing an FG AG style stud pattern, I would probably go with something pretty similar to this. And then in terms of the flexion of the sole plate, I'd say it's got about a medium stiffness with a little bit of bend towards the toe box. All right, now more importantly, let's get on to what you guys want to know, and that's how these actually feel on feet. So despite not being a fan of last year's Copa Pure 2, I gotta say I was actually really hyped when I got these out of the box, and when I was at the field trying them on, I was really excited. I mean, the leather in the forefoot feels really soft, the knit inner liner is great, so I really thought, what could go wrong? The only thing that gave me a little bit of hesitation when I was holding the boots was that I did quickly notice that I felt the heel area was pretty shallow, especially compared to some of the other Adidas boots that I've tried on recently. But when I was lacing them up, things were going well. I thought the width was pretty average, and maybe you get a little bit more volume compared to the previous Copa Pure when you're looking at the toe box. And that's nice for me because I do have slightly wider feet. And in terms of length, these were also really standard. I got them in my typical size 10.5 US, and I had just the right amount of space at the end of the boots that I would normally like. So definitely, if you're looking at any model within the Copa Pure series, I would recommend going true to size. So things were going well, but then after I got them laced up, I stood up and started walking around, and that's where things started to fall apart. Because despite lacing them up pretty tightly, I immediately noticed that my heel was slipping. And I kind of sighed because I just thought, man, this is such a missed opportunity with these boots. Because the build quality feels overall really good, a lot of the materials feel really premium, but it feels like Adidas just kind of fumbled at the finish line. And I really wanted to figure out what was going on here, and guys, sometimes I like to take a scientific approach to these things, as scientific as you can even call this. So I got out my measuring tape and I wanted to figure out what was the actual depth you were getting with the heel area in these boots. So what I decided to do was to compare the Copa Pure 3 Pro that we're reviewing today with the Copa Icon 2, which is a boot that I reviewed about a month ago, which I really love and I had no issues with whatsoever. So if you look at these boots from the outside, you can't really notice much of a difference from the heel areas. In fact, it looks like they're roughly the same height. But what I actually did was I measured from the start of the insole up to around the middle of the heel padding, which is actually in contact with the back of your foot. And what I found is that the Copa Pure Pro here is almost an entire centimeter more shallow compared to the Copa Icon 2. More specifically, we're talking about a difference of 4.5 centimeters to about 5.5 centimeters. So I promise, guys, I'm not just making things up. This is a real measurable difference. And you may not think that 1 centimeter makes a big difference in terms of lockdown, but when you're talking about cleats or really any footwear whatsoever, it does make a substantial difference in terms of fit. So with all of that in mind, let's talk about how it affected what it was like to play in these boots. So right off the bat, I had to make some adjustments in terms of the lacing system. So usually I actually don't take advantage of this top additional lace hole in any boots that I have. They even have that additional lace hole in the Copa Icon 2. They've got it in the New Balance 442s as well. Usually I just don't find it necessary. But with the Copa Pure Pros here, I had to use that additional lace hole just to get enough lockdown so that my ankle and heel weren't slipping out of the boots. And after lacing them up like that, it did definitely help. I found it easier to walk around and run around in the boots with them feeling a little bit more secure on my feet. But while I did get slight improvements in the lockdown after taking advantage of that additional lace hole there, I did have to get the laces really tight across the top of my foot just to get that added security. And to be honest, it's just not that comfortable having to almost suffocate and cut off the circulation to my ankle. I think this may come off as me sounding picky or something, but listen, whenever I'm reviewing a pair of boots that's over $100, I expect things like that to be sorted out. And the lackluster heel area in these boots is a really big shame because all of the other aspects of them, literally every other feature, is great. I mean, the upper is so soft and the touch on the ball when you're dribbling or just passing is great. You get a really clean, thin, and natural touch, and you also do get a ton of stretch from this sock-like liner, which was a great addition to the boots. And even the traction from the sole plate was really good, and I do think that this is a true FG/AG style stud pattern. But as I said before, the fit and the lockdown, especially for the money you're paying for these boots, it just has to be better. Now, speaking of money, let's talk about the value proposition of these boots. Now, the Copa Pure 3 Pro is going to retail for $140 US. And at this point, that's actually pretty common for a second tier takedown football boot. In fact, you see a lot of second tier models going for around $150. But the truth is, if you're about to spend $100 or more on any pair of football boots, there's a certain baseline level of quality that you should be expecting. And the price point that these boots occupy is actually a really crowded one because there are so many great football boots in that $100 to $200 price range. In fact, even from Adidas themselves, there are a lot of great options within that price range that don't have the same same issues that these boots have. So with that being said, let's go on to talk about some of the competitors to the Copa Pure 3 Pro. And the first boot I wanted to discuss is one I was talking about earlier in the video, and that's going to be the brand new Copa Icon 2. Now these boots are going to be a little bit more expensive, retailing for $180, but I do think they are currently one of the best boots Adidas is making. And of all of the boots that are currently in their Copa series, of which I think there are at least 4, this is definitely going to be my favorite. And despite the fact that they are going to be $40 more compared to the Copa Pure 3 Pro, they are going to be lighter in weight, they're going to have more room towards the toe box, and they're just overall going to be much better fitting, more comfortable boots. And with these, you don't have to do any special hack with the laces to get them fit right and to make sure your heel isn't slipping out of the boots. They just fit really great straight out of the box. Now, another alternative I wanted to mention is going to be the Nike Tiempo Legend 10 Pro. Now, the full retail price for the Legend 10 Pro was $150, and honestly, those are probably going to be the most direct competitor to the Copa Pure Pros. And despite the fact that the Tiempo Legend 10 is no longer made from leather, they actually share a lot of similarities from a feature standpoint with the Copa Pures here. They have a really soft upper, but then also this soft sock-like inner liner. But from a fit perspective, and especially from a lockdown perspective, I do think that the Legend 10 from Nike, they're just going to be better football boots. And also, since the Tiempo Legend 10 has been out for a really long time now, you can actually usually find the Legend 10 Pro heavily discounted. I think now you can find it for between $100 to $110. And just as a side note about Nike football boots, while I definitely have criticisms of a lot of their models, and I kind of explain them in my full reviews, I don't think I've ever noticed issues with lockdown on any takedown Nike football boot, including the ones that sell for like $60 and $70. But sometimes with Adidas, I feel like you're almost flipping a coin with some of their boots as to whether or not they have a good heel area or a bad heel area. And it really shouldn't be that way. For example, the next competitor on our list is going to be the F50 Pro. And the F50 Pro is also going to retail for around $150, so a very similar price to the Copa Pure Pros here. And the F50 Pro is an amazing football boot. In fact, with the F50 Pro, the touch is great, the upper is super soft, and it's honestly almost as good as the Elite version that retails for about $100 more. So it's kind of unclear to me why Adidas have made some silly mistakes on this model when they pretty much nailed some of their takedown boots last year. And then finally, if you're just looking for an affordable leather football boot that has a great fit from the get-go, then you can look at the Copa Gloro 2, also from Adidas. That boot's only going to retail for $99, and it has a great fit. Or you can check out the Nike Premier 3, which actually has a more similar design aesthetic to the Copa Pure Pro here. That boot is going to retail for around $110 depending on the colorway, but the Premier 3s are going to offer you a better fit. So what are my final thoughts on the Copa Pure 3 Pro from Adidas? Ultimately, these boots had so much potential. They've got a great upper, solid build quality, and when you get them on feet, they are definitely playable. But I can't help but get the feeling that in the testing phase, Adidas didn't have enough people try on these boots, because if they did, they could have told pretty quickly that the lockdown is pretty poor. Now, of course, your experience could vary, so if you want, you can try the boots out for yourself and see how they feel. But in my experience, around this price point, there are going to be better boots from Adidas and just better boots from other brands. And guys, that is going to do it for this video. Have you guys got a chance to try out these boots or any other boots from the Copa Pure 3 series? If you have, let me know in the comments below. Also, if you have enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.